So welcome everyone. This is the first episode of the Mega podcast, not the Oscuro podcast. So this is a new one. And for a very first episode, I already have a guest who is Serene Desiree from Australia. So, hello.
Hello. Nice to see you. Thank you for having me on for the inaugural podcast. I feel so special.
Okay. Yeah, it's great to have you here. And today's episode is all about Yeonmi Park more. And I think it's going to be more a discussion about her journalism and what she kind of does right now, like on YouTube.
Journalism.
Yeah, the journalism, you know? But yeah, would you like to say like how we met each other and like why you're interested in the subject?
Yeah, sure. So I made a video on Yeonmi Park. Actually, about the same time. We both posted our videos at the same time. You posted yours like a day or two before I posted mine, and I was almost disheartened. I was almost like, oh, he did everything. Why would I do this? And then I posted it anyway, and I shared my link under your description, and you were kind enough not to be like, get the fuck out of here, stop promoting your own stuff in my video. Instead, you came to me and you wrote this little mini essay on my YouTube comment section, and we kind of became friends from there, I guess. And yeah, I think we both have similar points of view on Yeonmi Park, with maybe slightly different opinions. So it's we had some good discussions.
Okay, great. Like yeah, for from my perspective, it's also like Ashley said, basically, you know, link in the comment section, and I checked out the video. It was a rather good video when it comes to basically, you know, the general story of Yeonmi Park, like how she portrays herself, and also her journalism. And even though I disagreed with a few points, then basically I invited her on the podcast. And yeah, so basically it's gonna be more a, I guess, discussion to see like if like we know where we like have a middle ground, where we disagree on. So I think this is gonna be the interesting part. And for later, we also want to show a case of misleading journalism, or well, it was faking evidence or faking media to portray a video that existed from the North Korean government as something that it was not. So it was a fraudulent video that Yeonmi posted on her channel. That's also part of this podcast topic.
And I think this is probably this is kind of breaking news for me, specifically because generally Yeonmi Park's life, I think you can separate it into two distinct parts. There's before she wrote her book and after she wrote her book. So before she wrote her book, in I think it was published in 2015. 2015. She was on tour. She was giving this speaking tour and talked to many journalists, and her stories varied wildly. And look, trauma victims sometimes they have like false memories that, you know, you can't blame them. But she has like 3-year periods where she lived with one relative, and then in another story she lived with another relative. Like there are really huge discrepancies that we can't, I don't think, look past all that easily. And then after she wrote her book, she had this story of like she had this revelation about telling the truth, and now she's all honest. And then after that, her stories really aligned well. Like every time she gave an interview, it was essentially the exact same story as her book. And so and a lot of her people who go to defend her will often say like, well, now she's telling the truth and stuff like that. But in this video that you discovered, I think we have some pretty solid evidence that she is lying, like outright lying.
Yeah, like we discovered, Elwood and me, like the co-writer for Mega Yeonmi North Korea, we were basically avid watchers of Yeonmi Park, maybe in Yeonmi's perspective, the wrong reasons. And we found a bunch of video reports, overall like videos about various things about like on her channel, you know. And one of those videos was the video where she claimed like a North Korean report was talking about UFOs taking people away, and it caught our attention. And even back then, I tried contacting people on Fiverr to translate the video, but either people were scared away from the dialect, which is very hard to translate, or they didn't want to get involved with such a, I guess, politically charged topic. But even back then, I got confirmation from Koreans that the subtitles were fraudulent that were present in the video. And lately, we actually paid various translation companies, and I also paid another individual to get translations, transcriptions of the video. And the running theme is that the translations make it's hard to make sense of them because due to the video being in I think it was the Chosun dialect in Korean. South Koreans translating the video had huge problems actually pinning down what they were talking about. But there were blatant similarities between one transcription from one company, from another company, and then from another individual, and also a bunch of volunteers that helped out, that tried translating the video first. They also confirmed that nothing really made sense, like what they transcribed. But at the very least, it never included anything about rotten eggs or UFOs or people disappearing in a city. So that it's obvious that those transcripts, those subtitles were fraudulent, basically.
And I want to make it clear how egregious of a lie this is as well, because Yeonmi is in this video. Essentially, she's putting out into the Western media that North Korea has disappeared an entire city. Like, essentially, she's asserting and she's telling people willingly that North Korea essentially killed. I mean, that's the implication, that they killed hundreds of thousands of people. And look, I'm not pro North Korean government. I don't think they're a paradise over there. I don't think they're doing wonderful things. But it's not a good idea. I don't think we need to lie about them either. I think there's plenty of things, truthful things we can say about North Korea that don't involve a small genocide that occurred in this town. It seems pretty ridiculous to me, and it seems inflammatory. I can see maybe Yeonmi is justifying it to herself by saying the North Korean government is evil. We should be spreading this propaganda about it, but I'm not okay with lies like that.
Regarding the lies, that is something where I also saw, like, I see it like this when it comes to facts and whatever. I think objectivity doesn't exist. So you have a fact, and then this fact can be interpreted in different ways. For instance, if we have like known information about North Korea or about an individual, then two people will come up with two different conclusions. Depending on in what light they see that person or subject. And Yeonmi Park is doing like basically giving the worst impression on North Korea possible on various articles and various like stories that appear that may or may not be well sourced. Like, that's also a thing. Like, some stories that she mentions are well sourced and might have actually happened. Others not so much. But in this case, it was fabrication, which is very malicious reporting. Like, it's just making shit up, like, actively. And the thing that makes it worse is that Yeonmi Park is a North Korean lady, so she should be able to know that these subtitles are not real. So that's the part that I don't understand, because in the comment section of her video, I also have screenshots in case the video's in case the video gets taken down. She also made various comments, like responding to commenters, acting as if the video was real, basically being like, yeah, it's such a bizarre thing. Yeah, it's such a weird thing. She never explicitly said that the subtitles are real. So she is covering her ass a little bit. So in case, in case she gets wind of this production here, and of the story about the UFO video, she might retract that video and then just say, oh, I never said that the subtitles are real. I just said that it's the North Korean state media that is really bizarre. So I don't know what might happen, but this might be a possibility, like, going forward.
Yeah, I also took good thinking. Great minds think alike. I also took a snapshot of the comments as well, and all of the comments, I don't know about all of them, but almost all of them believe it's real. I mean, they're saying, Yeah, they're just saying stuff about how the North Korean government lies to its people and all that stuff. So it's in no way does anyone seem to think that this is a joke.
Yeah, the vast majority of people actually believe it, and I also noticed with like looking at Yeonmi Park for a while that people not knowing the language are super easy to manipulate, and this is maybe also why Yeonmi Park is so popular in America and not in South Korea. Because in South Korea, if Yeonmi Park had a big South Korean following, if she posted that video of the North Korean news report, people would immediately say, okay, no, wait, that's bullshit. Like, it's never gonna be about UFOs and rotten eggs. Like, this is a different dialect, but we understand this is not the same thing. Meanwhile, us foreigners, we don't know any better, and you can't expect everyone to learn South Korean or North Korean to understand news reports. So, I definitely wouldn't like put blame on people that actually believe that the report is real because they're putting their faith in Yeonmi's reporting. It's just too bad to see that because there is a gigantic language barrier that most people are not going to acknowledge that the video is, or not going to realize ever that the video is fake. So who knows how many people got this misinformation, and how many people will not get the correction, will not get to hear the reality behind the situation.
Yeah. And I'm going to include my translation as well. So I had one translated, and then you had two translated. And one of yours had really no similarities, but the second one that you got translated had quite a few. Can I read off some of the similarities so people?
Of course.
So in the if anyone wants to check for themselves, in the first sentence she mentions Kim Jong-il, and in Yeonmi Park's video, she doesn't mention Kim Jong-il at all. She only mentions Kim Jong-un. And so you can just hear for yourself that the translation is not correct. I mean, it's pretty obvious. They mention things like the Kuwait Times, Kim Jong-il's birthday. They mention nurseries. The issue number 666 is mentioned. And then like at the end, Baktu Mountain is mentioned. So like there are very few similarities. The South Koreans didn't seem to know how to translate it very well, but there were enough that you can kind of piece it together.
Exactly, and the main point of the transcripts, of course, wasn't to expect a 100% accurate translation, because I mean. I'm fairly certain that, for instance, in Australia, over at your end across the world, there's a bunch of dialects that maybe you also have trouble understanding. I just know in Germany, if I talk to a Bavarian or if I talk to a Swiss German or an Austrian, I don't fucking understand them many times. Like I don't. Or my grandma that is with us right now. At my apartment now, she speaks in Sicilian, which is an Italian dialect, which is nothing like Italian in many ways. So, in case you don't believe us that it's so hard to translate that media article, just think about the time where you met someone from a different state in America or something, and they had a really strong dialect, and it was hard to understand. Like that's basically what we're talking about. There is a language barrier even amongst Koreans here.
Yeah, Scottish people can be hard to understand. I think, unfortunately, it's hard for English people to conceptualize this, because I think the media has kind of leveled out our playing field, so to speak. But yeah, generations ago, it was different, and it was very hard to understand people. I can understand. In Germany, I speak German, and I went to Germany when I was a kid, and I asked for. We went to Munich, and so they speak a different dialect. And I asked for chocolate, and they were like, I don't know what you're saying. It was super simple, and they had no idea.
Yeah, those guys speak Bavarian.
Yeah.
So Bavarian is super tough. It's something else. But there's also many different dialects, like Kölsch and whatever. Like basically every region has their own dialect, and some are worse than others. It's also a pain to really I tried finding North Korean contacts, because I also tried because of the documentary that I released. There's now a bunch of viewers that are very much DPRK sympathizers, DPRK pro DPRK people. I even asked a few of them hey, might you have like North Korean contacts? And surprisingly, you would expect there to be people that they know, but there weren't, you know. So yeah, I think the Korean friendship associations, even though they are, you know, basically state sponsored, as far as I understand, even with those guys, it was difficult to actually find a North Korean that might be able to translate this. That, of course, would have been like spot on perfect, but that sadly did not happen.
Well, we can find some. You know, this is a shout out if you want to translate this for us.
Yeah, exactly. So if anyone wants to take a crack at it, you can. You will also have access to the transcript and to the 2 different subtitled videos. So if you are Korean and you want to take another crack at it, then you can. The more the merrier. If we have even more translations that deviate from what is being said, you know, in the report, the more foolproof it gets, basically. So in the end, the more the merrier, you know? So even if it's a poor translation, at least it's an attempt, so to speak. Yeah. Yeah. Anything more to say about the UFO video?
I don't think so. No, I think that's about all.
I think we covered everything here.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, how were you made aware of Yeonmi Park?
Oh, I'm a huge Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan fan. I think that's getting more and more difficult to say in public, but yeah, I love them. And so like I was watching Yeonmi Park's interview with I think Joe Rogan first, and I just decided to look her up, and then I found that the Diplomat article, that telling Diplomat article in 2014, there was a kind of a giant essay from the Diplomat that was published, and it just had all of Yeonmi Park's contradictions laid out, and I was like, oh, this is interesting, and I yeah, I was somewhat shocked that Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan and like Lex Friedman and all of these people were interviewing her despite the controversy. Not that I blame them because uh, it took me a while to sort out. I really dug deep, and I did a dive for quite a few days. I read her book in like 2 days, and I just read a bunch of material, watched a bunch of her videos, and then I kind of came to a conclusion. And these people don't necessarily have time to do that sort of research. So I get it, but it was very. I wanted to know whether I could trust her as a source of information, essentially, and I don't think I can.
And I think that's also what we talked about a bit when we recorded something off stream, like not recorded, but when we talked off stream, off camera, so to speak. Don't worry, this isn't live. So yeah, I'm slipping up here. But we also talked about this before, where I think that people like Yeonmi Park, we want to take them seriously. We want to hear them out, like no matter what, you know, and we don't want to tell a victim of an oppressive regime that they're lying, or we don't want to tell them, hey, I don't really quite believe you, you know. So, and I think a case like the UFO video, or you know, cases like, you know, various different videos, you know, that I don't know if you noticed that, but like the more videos come out, the more propagandistic they sound, because Yeonmi keeps repeating the same points over and over again. It's like a loop, you know. She always says a revolution might be starting, Kim Jong-un is dying, XYZ, cannibalism is resurging, super sensationalistic. And again, I think Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan, like all these people, I think they just didn't really look into the person first, and I don't really blame them for that, because if a North Korean defector came to my doorstep, so to speak, and said, I have this harrowing story to tell, then, you know, my emotional, empathic side would immediately take their word for it, you know. And for instance, like on my end, like I wouldn't even have known about Yeonmi Park if my partner Elwood wouldn't have showed her stuff to me. And how he showed me her stuff was on a more like memey kind of jokey way. Like he showed me like a video from the Joe Rogan clip, you know, where Yeonmi Park basically says, so there's only one train going to one station. It takes a month to go, and many times the North Koreans had to push the train, and that was the moment where, for me, like I was like, wait, that's weird. So that's how basically Elwood pushed me down the rabbit hole of looking up her story. So I also bought her book. I bought it twice, by the way. Once in German, once in English, but I didn't read the German version. It's a yeah, like for me it was also kind of weird to go through all of it. Like I didn't really have a neutral lens on it, like going in. I was critical from the start, but that was only because I was thrust into the subject, so to speak. So I think this is where like we have our difference, and this is why I also have to say, like, my perspective on this is also not like objective. You know, it doesn't exist in my opinion like an objective, but maybe from Serene's perspective, it's more kind of distanced, like because you basically got in, like, you know, the Yeonmi believer, you know, the believer, so to speak, you know, like okay, that's a horrible story, whatever, and then you dug deeper, you know. Meanwhile, for me, Elwood was basically like, yo, check this shit out, you know, check this dumb shit out, and I'm like, oh yeah, it is kind of dumb. So I started off from there, you know. So this is also, I think, a significant difference in how we approach the subject, basically.
Yeah, and I really had an opinion from the get-go. I'm of not trying to get too much into what happened in North Korea. For instance, the trains not working. Like we know that there are, to this day, power outages in North Korea. So I don't really know whether they had to push the trains. I mean, maybe they push it downhill. I don't know what happens, right? So I'm not really trying to debate about what happened in North Korea and what didn't happen in North Korea. I was really just focused on what Yeonmi said that contradicted her own words, because that's something I can really look at and find inaccuracies in, that I don't have to like believe, you know, some North Korean person or whatever.
What is your stance on the different versions of the same escape story? Because I was levied some criticism as well, like when it comes to how we talked about her story, like in the document, and we left a lot of shit out, by the way. Like, for instance, the you know, like inconsistencies with her dad's burial, the inconsistencies of the dad's prison time and stuff. We left a bunch of shit out. But the one thing that I want to ask you is, would you say it's a semantic issue that in one version of the story, Yeonmi claims, like through an entire year of 2014, that she escaped with both of her parents, and that later on the story basically changed or was added more detail to when she said that she escaped first with her mother and then she helped her dad escape?
Yeah, yeah. So if you believe the canon of Yeonmi, so what she says is that the book is all true, and then anything that happened before that, I think she says she improvised like a jazz musician. So yeah, I'm not honestly, like I wasn't really too caught up with like what happened before the book, because she admits to lying, and so whether or not it's semantic, whether or not, I mean, she she could have just said like I escaped with both my parents as a way to truncate the situation, but I just wasn't super interested in what she said before the book was true, because she admitted to lying anyway. So why am I bothering? And like the same with burying her dad. At first she said she buried her dad, and then she said she cremated him. And then on the book she finalized with I cremated my dad and then I buried him. So
yeah,
then
she
could
mixed
be right.
the stories, so to speak, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so then she could be right on both fronts, and like whatever. I mean, I before when I first published my video, I was on the side of like, hey, maybe we should, like, I was taking her book as fact, or as I was taking her perspective in a way. But now after seeing this UFO video, I don't think I don't believe anything she says. I mean, I'm sure she's telling the truth about some things, but I don't know what's true, and I'm not really interested in like delving too deep into what's true and what's not, because she's still lying. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm sure she could understand what that video was saying. It was on Korean national news, which implies that most people could speak that language, and she was still putting out false videos. So like,
And
yeah,
yeah, like
Did someone lie?
I guess the thing here is also that in the end, why, for instance, my documentary didn't really go deep into her personal story is that basically just mentioned it and then it went into the journalism part. Even if everything she said, everything about her story was real, which it might be, it might also be wrong. We don't fucking know. I mean, it's all anecdotal anyways. But if let's assume it's real. For the rest of this podcast, I'm gonna assume it's all real. The book is the real version of the story. It's kind of irrelevant at this point, because even if you escaped a terrible regime and you survived hardship, it's not good to lie about your experiences or to lie about certain, rather about either happenings going on in North Korea or overhyping, over sensationalizing certain news that may or may not be real. According to Yeonmi Park, Kim Jong-un has been on his deathbed for years, for instance, and every time she says Kim Jong-un might be dying soon, or he's definitely gonna die and an uprising is gonna come, an uprising never came. Kim Jong-un never died. He's still there, or he has a doppelganger. Let's see. Maybe that's the case, but I doubt that.
Well, to me, she seems like a conspiracy theorist, like somebody who is. I think she has. And I can understand this. It seems like if I'm going to read her mind, which obviously I can't, I don't know what's going on in her head, but like it seems like she has a lot of trauma attached to this, and I feel like she's just very emotionally attached to these issues. And she probably did face a lot of hardships in North Korea. I'm sure she did. And she probably wants Kim Jong-un to be dying, and she probably wants, there to be a revolution. But you know what, even I just want to say, even if she was lying at the beginning, that doesn't completely discount it for me, because a lot of people in North Korea have, especially in the 90s during the arduous march, I mean, between 200,000 and 3.5 or something million people died. And so she faced death all the time. I'm not convinced she was poor. I actually have a hunch that she was rich, but, she definitely saw hard things. And in North Korea, you have to lie. I mean, I'm pretty sure that that you have to. Yeonmi Park talks about this, so I don't know how true it is, but you confess every week about not being a good enough North Korean citizen. But you see documentaries, and every time you have a documentary, someone gets interviewed and they say, there's this one I saw, it was like, why did you become a tractor driver? And the guy says, so I could better serve our leader. That's everyone's response, always on the tip of their tongue, is because I want to serve our leader better, because I love my country. And they're lying. I mean, most of them are lying. I don't know if this tractor driver was. I don't want to get him in trouble. But people have to lie, and so when they come to a Western country, or South Korea, I can understand if they're lying initially, because that's kind of part of their instincts. But Yeonmi claimed to have gotten past that, and now she is still telling lies. And at which point I can't buy it. I don't know what's going on with her. I wish her the best, but she is not a credible news source, and that's pretty much it for me.
And what you mentioned with the lying stuff, I mean, I know from my country's history. I mean, Germany.
Oh, what was your country? What was Germany's history?
Germany's
in Italy?
history.
Did
they? Italy, not because post World War II, Italy, the Italian. Yeah, I'm from Italy, but I live in Germany. But
you're from the worst countries in World War II.
Yeah, I'm from the most fascistic ones. So I'm a fascist and a Nazi. So yeah, that's horrible. Horrible combi, But but essentially from Germany's history, I know, for instance, that Germany was split up into different parts. Western, Eastern, and I also talked to various people that lived in the German Democratic Republic. And for instance, there was an air of mistrust. There was an air of basically vigilance, because
one was a spy in the Deutsche Demokratische Republic, right?
What again?
1 in 5 people was a spy, right? Back then.
Yeah, I think it was something crazy like that. It was pretty. They had a pretty good network of information, so to speak. And there's also undeniable claims that it was a very controlling environment for people. So I would actually believe any North Korean that escaped that to some extent they had to be disingenuous, because again, like North Korea is a cult of personality. It's a necrocracy where Kim Il Sung is the eternal leader, and then it basically descends like that. So at some point there's gonna be the Starbucks employee of the Kim dynasty in the grand. It depends how long the country will. If the country will be 1,000 years old, there's still gonna be the God Emperor at the very top, and then the Starbucks employee at the very bottom. So they always give descending ranks to not devalue the people above, so to speak, right? So if you somehow got like access to, for instance, the deep web, and you like read about like Western countries in North Korea, you might want to keep your mouth shut, because basically going against that system might bring negative consequences to you, just as much as for instance in America, like there is a big fear campaign against communistic socialistic thought. So if you openly say, hey everyone, I'm a communist, maybe you're not really gonna get the best reactions. The only difference being that in America, at least, you don't get jailed for it, or you don't get sent to an education camp. At least I hope so.
Everyone in Seattle is a communist. You just move to Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, you're fine. It's fine.
Yeah, then you're with other people that like agree with you. Yeah, but I would also I would give her the benefit of the doubt on that one. It's just that like when it comes to the lying stuff, like I mean, for one, you're kind of admitting that you are a bit unreliable, which for me is a bit of a problem. And second, the other thing that I find annoying about the whole thing about the stories, the 100% truth, according to the book, for instance, the idea to escape was from Yeonmi's parents. But lately, Yeonmi, for instance, started spreading the version of the story, like on the PragerU fireside chat. I think it was episode 203. That was the first instance where I heard her say that the idea to escape was on Yeonmi's and Eunmi's end. And then in another interview with, I think he's called Drew Binsky, like a travel YouTuber. Yeah. Basically, she also said again, the idea to escape was mine. Which again is not really true. Like according to her book with the 100% truth. And so there still are inconsistencies that are popping up basically.
Eunmi's idea initially in the book.
In the book,
right?
Not quite. Basically, how it transpired in the book was that the parents, at some point, the parents decided. I think it was right after Park Chan-si like got back together with the family. The parents decided that people need to escape. Like somehow the children have to get out of here. And then the parents tasked Eunmi and Yeonmi to basically go out into the city and find a broker, like a human trafficker. And that was basically the plan. That Eunmi and Yeonmi have to go out and find someone. But then Yeonmi got sick and the plan got cut short. But it definitely was not Yeonmi's idea. It was basically Yeonmi in the book said, I was this naive, like, I was kind of blind to the idea. Basically, it was my parents and then Eunmi that told me, we need to do this, So there's like these two kind of different interpretations here, which to me is kind of weird, Like there's still stuff after the 100% truth coming out that's kind of inconsistent,
I remember a different version in the book, but honestly, I've heard so many versions of this story that I think
you have a different version of the book?
No, I think I remember a different version happening in the book, but I've heard so many instances of the story that I'm probably just kind of mishmashing them all together. I mean, I've listened to dozens of her videos. I don't know. I mean, yeah, there's still some little inconsistencies here and there for sure. In fact, I think the biggest one, this isn't an inconsistency, but I mentioned this on my video, but like the fact that she says about her education, I mean, that really struck me as hard to believe. And it's not impossible, but she says that she got to South Korea after she was, I think, 15 when she got to South Korea, maybe give or take a year, maybe she was 16. But she essentially got like very little education in North Korea. She says depending on her current sources, it's between 2 and 3 years of education and primary school education, and then I think 1 year of middle school. And then, so she gets to South Korea, she tests at a below second grade reading and math level, and then in 18 months, she graduates high school. She graduates with a GED. And so she goes from she goes from Dr. Seuss books, essentially, that type of reading level, to biographies of Martin Luther King and Abraham Lincoln and I think Malcolm X. And like she says she read, I don't remember how many books, but it was like 60 or something books during that time. So she's going from not being able to read at all to graduating high school knowing Korean history, knowing math, knowing Korean. There were 3 other subjects that she had to know in the GED and then some electives. So an entire high school curriculum, and also on top of that, reading dozens and dozens of books. And if you think about it, I mean, you don't read difficult biographies like that if you have a second grade reading level. So really, she'd have to learn to read first, which might take 6 months, a year, and then she would have to. So in that last 6 months, she's reading 60 books. Like, there's a lot to unpack there. Apparently, Yeonmi came over and she graduated in 10 months, and then Yeonmi after that gets something like 33rd in her very, very difficult university course in in one of the best universities in South Korea. And then the next semester she gets 14th or something. So she's out of 96 people, out of 100 people, something like that. So she's placing in the top third quartile in South Korea, which is an incredibly, incredibly competitive country. I mean, I'm just saying the story would make a lot more sense to me if she grew up upper class and had a good education to begin with. I mean, that would make a lot more sense to me than going from not being able to read essentially to, to topping almost, top 12% of her class or whatever it is in a few years.
And also, I also have to say, like, Yeonmi and Eunmi, like, they do seem like there's not much about Eunmi out there because she's not really in the public. I don't want to drag her too much into it. But for instance, like according to the SBS Dateline report from years ago, like before the book was written, I mean, like hearing Eunmi and Yeonmi like recounting the story, and Yeonmi also learned English and stuff, so they're definitely intelligent people, and they definitely are learned in some way. It's just that, like, for me, it's hard to believe that Yeonmi really cares about certain aspects of Western culture that much. Like, I find it weird. Like, for instance, there's a lot of things about Columbia U, which she said that is also on shaky ground. Like, she said, I don't remember the name of the person that she mentioned, sadly, but basically she said, okay, there's those teachings from whatever philosopher or something, and she really likes that guy, and the Marxists at Columbia U really dislike him, and they hate him, and basically you're not allowed to talk about him or something. Meanwhile, it has come out that, for instance, Columbia U, like that specific person that Yeonmi was talking about, his work is necessary to read to actually pass the lectures. Or, for instance, Yeonmi also complained at some point that, the Marxist Communist University, when they were talking about music theory, that they were complaining about the Eurocentric white music theory that was being taught, and it should have been more global. And Yeonmi was one of the only people that stood up to it and said, but why, guys? It's like great and stuff. I don't really buy it that she really cares about that. I don't. It's not even a thing of like saying oh, she doesn't know or she doesn't read any books. No, it's not like what I'm trying to imply. It's just that, like, she might read those books. She might think about this talk. I don't really think she believes it. I don't really think she cares that much.
I'm not a fan of social justice warriors at all, and still I think when she says Columbia University is like North Korea or it's worse than North Korea, I mean that's a big stretch in my opinion. And here's the thing, though. I mean, she here's an alternate perspective on Yeonmi Park's story that a few people have already raised. So, like, you're a North Korean defector from whichever class of society she comes from, and you get to South Korea and you're discriminated against because South Koreans are discriminatory. I mean,
Oh,
there's
a
a lot
lot.
of racism and all that in South Korea, and especially towards North Koreans. And you get there and you can't get jobs and you're way behind and you don't understand how the subway works or whatever, and you just you feel like you're drowning, and then all of a sudden a TV crew calls you up and they say, "We'll pay you $1,000 for an interview." And then I think you mentioned this already on yours, but like if you come up with a story that's, harrowing and terrible, it's going to get you more interviews. And, and then she gets to America and there's all these wonderful right-wing people that she can talk to. And I mean, I don't know how much I feel like she's a little just ideologically possessed, for lack of a better word. I mean, I think maybe she believes the stuff, but it seems to me a lot like she's so emotionally attached to these right wing ideas, maybe for good reason. Maybe she's probably very traumatized. I
She
mean,
she also very much like is only like in the like right wing kind of sphere. She doesn't actually talk. I don't remember her talking to a lefty at all. Like I don't remember. Like she talks like to people like Robert Kiyosaki, Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan, whatever. And it's always these people that have a more right-leaning stance on things. And by the way, that's not really a bad thing. If those are the people that want to talk to her, that's fine. It's just that I do find it kind of weird that there is this weird. She kind of shifted the focus away a little bit from like the inter-Korean relationship, north and south, and now she kind of is all in on America, like she's writing a book about how America's becoming communist, which is never gonna fucking happen. Like I will tell you right now, that's never gonna happen. But still, like as in that America's turning communist, I don't believe that's true at all. Because even Democrats in America are pretty right wing for us Europeans, like from our perspective. Because for instance, in Germany, like we're pretty like we have more lefty ideas in many ways, for instance. So I don't think that's gonna happen. But I don't know. Have you noticed that, like, or is that just like my interpretation that she's kind of shifting the focus a bit, like away from North Korea, more towards America?
oh look, though, if you move to America, I mean, if you've ever been to America, it's so culturally divided. I mean, maybe not everywhere. I don't know about the Midwest or whatever, but like, I spent some time in most of my time in Seattle, which is like the leftist epicenter essentially, and it's very, very divisive. I mean, it's essentially like it's getting more and more like you're either on one side or the other. And I think even businesses, like certain businesses are right-leaning businesses and others are left, and we only patronize these ones. It's getting bad, and I could see her. And even like I posted something about Yeonmi Park, and I think to the intellectual dark web, Reddit or something, and someone said, "Why are you bothering with this? North Korea is a bad country." And it's like, so essentially they were saying she's saying what we want her to say. She's on our team. Why are you saying disparaging things about her? Why are you accusing her of lying? And it's like, that's crazy to me. I mean, just because she's on my team, like just because I guess I consider myself center in a bunch of different ways, but people on the left hate everyone, and everyone left of Marx is a Nazi, and so it's kind of hard to like be truly on the left. Um, yeah, so just because she's on my like team, we're not supposed to disparage her at all. We're not supposed to say mean things about her. That's crazy to me.
Yeah,
It's just
and
American culture.
it's to me that's kind of a tragedy because, for instance, when it comes to I also got this question, like almost like this baffled response, like, so what's your point? So North Korea is still a bad country to live in, but it's slightly less bad so what's the point, and then, like, the point is, in the end, for instance, again, like with what a big focus was on the documentary, like, there's a lot of historical facts and a lot of well, not facts, but there's like a lot of historical stuff that is spreading around, and a lot of like news reports spreading around that are not founded in reality, that, or that are just straight up wrong. For instance, from Vox, there's a video that suggested that North Korea was founded upon imperialist Japanese ideals. That's insane. Like, North Korea exists because they were in opposition of Japanese control, and they accepted communism, which is definitely not a fascistic idea. Like, it's not a fascistic ideology, so it's completely different. When you talk about like news stories of like, for instance, the orchestra conductor that was shot, the dude that wrote the article, he was like, yeah, I don't really know exactly what the name was. I'm sure he was shot anyway. That's what he wrote. I'm sure he was shot anyway. Is that really, like, does that show you that, there is enough confidence there? Like, is there really enough information here to really know this orchestra conductor was shot 90 times with an AK? And then how Yeonmi said they had to pick up the body parts with shovels. I mean, I've seen some live leak videos, I think, getting shot with an AK 90 times. I think that doesn't turn you into kibble. So I don't know. Like, there's a bunch of news that are really on shaky ground, and I think that needs to be addressed. Even though we're talking about a country that I'm assuming you and me both would never want to live there for an extended period of time. I would go there for like a month or two and see how it is, but I would like to experience the country at some point and see, like, okay, how are things like? How are the people here? Whatever. How's the food? So I would rather go there as a tourist, but I definitely wouldn't live there.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's just one of those countries where I mean, it's like the USSR was back in the day. I mean, or like Stalinist Russia, like Mao's China. I mean, they just walled off the entire country. Nobody could go in or out besides very, very specific few people. And we just got kind of leaks of news out there. And then I think the thing was, most people just projected what they wanted to see onto the country. So some people projected like a Russia with rosy-cheeked women dancing around and singing Russian songs, and other people saw a communist wasteland. And the latter was more correct than the first. But I don't know. I mean, I'm not even. I can't even speculate on what's going on in North Korea. Like, I don't think it's good. But I mean,
because in the end, like, it doesn't even matter, like, what we think the country might be like. For all we know, the country might be super fine to live there. Like, maybe, we don't know, because the thing is, we just, there is an iron curtain, so to speak, there. So we can't just go there and see for ourselves, and we can't just we don't have much, we don't have home videos, we don't have like private video productions or something from people there. We don't have anything.
We do have documentaries that go,
yes.
Documentary crews that go sometimes. And what we see is, some of them actually show like farmers who have to shovel their own shit into pits and then use the methane and kind of use that to
we saw the same documentary, and that for instance is like also something that Yeonmi like wrote in the book. Like, she was like, oh, by the way, North Koreans had a shitting quota, so to speak, oh, they had to give shit to the like state and stuff, and she just didn't mention that basically, human and animal waste was used to produce fuel, because the North Koreans, because of the sanctions, they can't just fucking buy fuels. They can't just buy a propane tank and use that for cooking. So they have their own biofuel that they make themselves. It's kind of ingenious. And also, like, I find it interesting that that specific documentary, whenever a woman was asked about a relationship, the woman was always like, okay, I was courted, and I liked him, and we both decided to be together, because it's just an interesting perspective to see, like, normal people talk about their lives, because even though there is a lot of propaganda coming out of North Korea, I doubt that people would distort their experiences with who they fall in love with, for instance, and how that transpires, because if they were in a super conservative mindset where, you know, women have no rights, so to speak, and the men just decide whatever, then you would see in the interviews, for instance, the marriage was arranged, it's just how it is right here, you know? But no, like, these interviews were like, he liked me, I liked him, and now we're gonna get married, you know? And that's really sweet, you know, that's actually pretty cool. So it also shows that, like, it was a more modern documentary that we're talking about. It was about a South Korean woman that lives in Germany that basically went to North Korea, like, interviewing people. We also see the country did evolve over time. So what we know now is, like, these pictures. We have these pictures in our heads of the Arduous March documentaries. Like, you know, from Journeyman TV, there's one where a care worker is getting kind of, like, is going through, like, a village and seeing, like, people starving and, you know, seeing, like, the failed crops and stuff. And it was overall a really complicated situation. But the country did kind of go out of that. It's only that due to sanctioning, they might fall into another Arduous March, an Arduous March 2.0, basically, because they also can't import medicine. So it's a really weird situation. And again, like, it might be a hellhole for some people. It might be a paradise for other people. And there might be a bunch of people that, I don't know, are somewhere in the middle, you know? And we just can't know.
I do want to say, I think your point in the sanction is really important, and I want to go there. But I just want to say, though, that, okay, so North Korea restricts documentary crews quite a lot. And if you had I think it was My Friends in the North, that German documentary, where she was allowed to go to see those farmers and stuff, they were experiencing electricity loss. They got quotas of wheat, apparently, but then they had to send most of it away to the central government or whatever it is. So, like, they were probably barely given enough wheat, and they had to use their own shit for fuel. And so that's what we were allowed to see. And we know that they were strict camera crews. I would hazard a guess that it's probably worse than that in other places. Now, I don't know.
Because infrastructure looks really bad there, I think.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, if that's what we're allowed to see, I think there's probably worse that we're not allowed to see, but I'm not sure.
Of course,
and there are many rumors about North Koreans being a huge part of the global meth trade and stuff like that. But anyway, whatever.
Which might be true, because, for instance, like, there's also, like, you know, allegations of North Korea, you know, basically, you know, selling weapons illegally, or you know, basically getting into crypto trading and, like, stealing Bitcoin or something. I personally believe that those claims are true, because if you're locked out of global trade, you can't actually get into you know, the World Bank, because the World Bank has anti-socialist, anti-communist kind of clauses. Like, if you want to be a part of the World Bank, I think you need to reject a country's socialist ideals. It's kind of weird. I don't really agree with that. But I mean, they have no avenues of actually generating any kind of income, so to speak, you know? So
they trade with China. So China allows, and, you know, usually I don't think of China as the saviors. I usually think of China as a terrible dictatorship. But in this sense, China is the lifeline of North Korea. I mean, Americans are starving. I mean, since the 90s, the Arduous March, we cut North Koreans out from getting oil and, you know, food products. They can't grow their own food. They don't have enough. Their land is way too cold, and so they can barely grow anything, and they don't have enough land for growing. So they are essentially starving. And we have intentionally starved North Korea. I mean, that is on our government as well. I don't think the North Korean government is doing the right thing, but we have some accountability here as well.
And I think a big problem that I also have with Yeonmi Park's reporting on North Korea is that she should be aware of the broader context of you know, the sanctions, and you know, also the very limited trade with China, because China's always on and off. Like, they're basically, sometimes they follow the sanctions a little bit, and other times they don't, and they just trade. Because they still see them as allies, and they don't want to lose North Korea, because, like, the North Korea, like, it's a great position for the Americans, for instance, to obtain. They really want hold of that, because, for instance, like, they have a bunch of, like, I think it was like a bunch of minerals and metals in their mountains. Maybe it's estimated to be like that they're super valuable. but again, like Yeonmi, she perpetrates this image that the people of North Korea are being starved intentionally, and like from looking like at these historical like things, like you have a terrible war that wipes out most infrastructure and buildings. You have like dams were blown up on purpose, because they didn't have anything left to bomb, so they're like, okay, let's blow up dams. So large parts of the land were flooded. Then after the war, there were multiple other conflicts which are being debated, then the Arduous March, that was just like them getting dealt really bad cards over and over again. You had mass floods, then you had mass droughts. It was horrible. So they didn't really, they were put in front of an ultimatum basically. So we have only this much food. Who do we give it to? Do we give food to everyone, or do we give food to people that work for us? So I guess if people work more, they get more food, and the others are left to starve. But what if they gave food to everyone? Then maybe everyone would be malnourished. It's like a really bad situation. Like neither option was really that good. And one of them really, like the one that they chose, really fucking sucked. Choosing what families get to starve and who gets to eat. That's not a decision anyone wants to make. And sadly, the government thought maybe that's the way to go. But
there was the option of coalescing with South Korea. There was the option of seceding.
And there was that. But then that would have been a capitulation. And I think the North Korean people also didn't want that, because if they wanted that, there would have been uprisings, I think.
Yeah.
And there was a bus. It honked. But yeah, it's just like, to me, it's just disingenuous to say that they willingly starve their own people, because willingly starving your own people in the greater context, it just doesn't make sense. Like you want them, North Korea's being basically like, we're basically saying, North Korea is like this highly militaristic country, and they are a threat, and basically they are intimidating us with their weapons and stuff. But at the same time, they're starving their own citizens, so they're weaker and they can't really. I don't know. Like, to me, it doesn't make sense. Like, it's kind of weird. I don't know. Like, it's again, it's like a really weird situation, and I think Yeonmi, like, if she was the voice of North Korea, as she claims she is on YouTube, she would fight against. What?
That's literally her channel's name. That's funny.
Voice of North Korea by Yeonmi Park. That's the name. Yeah. Like, the problem I have is, if she was the voice of North Korea, she would be 1000% against sanctions, and she would understand that the sanctions are not a good idea. Like, ever. Like, never. Because it only further like drives a stake through, for instance, men and women, because women are affected even worse by the sanctions because they have a double role in the society. So the sanctions are a horrible idea, and they should not be dismissed, like as she does. Like, for instance, in the Lawa 86 interview, like years ago, she said that sanctions exist, but they don't affect the poor people. They only affect Kim Jong-un and the WMD program. That's bullshit. That's complete bullshit. That's just not true, They don't
affect poor people. I mean, North Korea couldn't get food for a long time, but even, they can't get certain metals. Like, you have a restricted ability to have industry, which obviously affects poor people. I mean, many places can't get things like tractors, and so people are working, manual labor. And I mean, look, they can't get buildings made, things like that. But I don't think it's quite as simple as that. Although I know you know a lot more about this conflict than I do. You keep pulling out these facts that are like, holy shit, he certainly has done his research.
In large part, that was Elwood, by the way. Elwood did a lot of the digging. Like, basically did most of the digging. Yeah.
I haven't met Elwood yet. To me, you are the face and the brains of this operation. I keep forgetting about Elwood. Props to him. But I don't know if I want Kim Jong-un to have a bunch of nuclear weapons. I mean, he seems like kind of a psychopath. I don't know if I want him to have a bunch of power. Like, I mean, I don't think it's quite as easy as we say, because we lift the sanctions, they start getting free trade, and then suddenly Kim Jong-un has so much more power than he already does. He can suddenly exploit the minerals in his environment. He can suddenly make, many more nuclear missiles. Like, is he stable? Can we trust him to not blow up the world? I don't know.
For one, even if he wanted to blow up the world, he doesn't have enough nukes. So North Korea has like the
He has one for every major city, for most of the major cities.
So basically, he has like at max he has 60 nukes. That's like the maximum estimation that we have, and the most conservative estimation is like 15 nukes. So it's somewhere in between. So let's say
I don't 15 Nagasaki's or in Hiroshima's. That's not what I want.
That still sucks, But for instance, like if we look at Russia and America, they have the potential of recreating 6,000 Hiroshimas each, So they could do that, And there's also another thing to keep in mind that like the North Korean government, they're still open to dismantling the WMD program, so they're not married to it. And the other two times where a deal was struck between America and North Korea, it fell through because of America, not North Korea. It's just that, like, basically, for instance, the Trump deal, that was also a weird situation because basically Trump wanted to help the North Korean government basically financially, like he wanted to engage in trade with them. But then at some point, basically at first they wanted to do it like this. You give us some nukes and we lift some sanctions. And then you get rid of certain weapons programs and then we lift sanctions even more. But then at some point Trump was just like, so we want all of it. Like right now, and then, the North Korean government was like, okay, no, we're not going to do that because if we give you everything, we have nothing, and you might not lift the sanctions, So that was like a very it's like, in these Western movies or something where someone gives you something and then the other one gives you the thing and then both of them hold it and then, take it away and stuff. That's basically what's happening here, But they're still open to it, because they still take. At least that's how I interpret it. I think they take the lifting of sanctions more seriously than, their own WMD program. Because the North Koreans have a really interesting perspective on warfare. For them, what's going on right now between the West and themselves is war. Because they have this mindset of economic warfare, which for us is kind of alien. We don't think that... for instance, Germany and Russia, let's say in the future, Germany does not want to trade with Russia. We wouldn't look at that as committing warfare. Meanwhile, for the North Korean government, it kind of is.
I could understand why it's warfare. People don't have a lot of food. They're really struggling, so it probably does feel like a war.
Yeah, and
I would love to see Biden. I would love to see the Biden administration do something about this and make another deal with North Korea. That would be fantastic.
That would be great, because if they cooperated, then both sides could win, right? But it depends on what they want to achieve with North Korea and like what their actual end goal is. Sadly, like I see that we're approaching the hour mark because sadly I can't record that much more. Do you have any closing thoughts?
Not at all. These issues are complicated, and I would love if people tried to be less tribal and tried to understand that the world is a very complex place and that we can agree with our enemies sometimes. That's been weighing very heavily on my mind lately. So I would like to pass that on to the world. And you can find me at Serene Desiree, SERENE DESIREE. That's my YouTube channel. And I post things like this and also wacky stuff. I don't have a brand. That's my brand. So you can follow me there.
It's a variety channel with a lot of interesting stuff. And I hope you upload some more music stuff.
Yeah, thank you. Very makes me feel very good. Thank you.
But yeah, I would parrot basically what you just said. look at things from different perspectives sometimes, because again, for instance, with the North Korean translation thing, sometimes you cannot know really what the truth is, so it's always good to take certain things with a grain of salt. And it's sometimes also good to, you know, engage in you know, basically acknowledge criticism, acknowledge that there might be parts to the story that are not completely truthful, because in the end, if Yeonmi Park is criticized, Yeonmi Park can learn from her mistakes, and she can become a better journalist and a better North Korean activist. So in the end, I think being truthful about the fuck-ups only makes for a more healthy climate in the activism and journalism sphere.
I would love to see a redemption arc for Yeonmi. I would love to trust her again and to welcome her with open arms and to completely forgive her. That would be fantastic.
So yeah, I guess I'm going to conclude the podcast now. Thank you for watching, people in the future. And thank you very much for being on here, Serene.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
See the fucker can't see him. Top blues over, yeah, I gotta conceal him. 2, 2, 3 guns, yeah, 26 guns. I told my whip, let's go, let's go. Roll up and don't give it up in a second.